You should search for a perfect teacher. The Buddha, when he suggests that we find a teacher, he suggests that we find a perfect teacher. So, in a way, I shouldn't be here, you know, because I'm not perfect. So, the Buddha explains that so it's not like who should or who should not, it's more about the preference, you know. So if you know a teacher who is perfect, then it's always better than a teacher who is imperfect, if you have the choice. The problem today is that we don't have much choice. I visited 20 monks who are believed to be perfect in Myanmar. And I don't believe about a single of them that they are perfect. So it's not easy, you know, like when the choice is so narrow, then according to the Buddha, I'm now speaking strictly according to the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha suggests that a good teacher is fully enlightened. I'm not fully enlightened. So the Buddha's suggestion is that a good teacher is fully enlightened, experienced, well-versed, virtuous, and so on and so on. It's not so difficult to find a monk who is experienced, who is well-versed, who is virtuous, but it is quite difficult to find a monk who is fully enlightened. So at a moment when you do not have access to a fully enlightened monk, when you do not have an access to a monk who is perfected, then from my point of view, because of course I also have a teacher, it is better to find a teacher who is available and who you feel that can give you something you don't have yet. So you need to examine your teacher. The Buddha specifically suggested, and this is in Samyutta Nikaya Satta Jatila Sutta. The Buddha suggested to the king Kosala, Pasenari Kosala, that before he thinks that a monk is fully enlightened, he needs to stay with that monk for a long time, apply a very good mindfulness, a very good wisdom, and check and check and check. So the Buddha himself suggests that the students check their teacher. Be careful, many monks who would like to be teachers will not like this idea. But that's not in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, you know. The Buddha suggested that a good teacher is fully enlightened. That's it. It's very simple. Every other teacher is not coming up to the standard. You can always check a monk. Of course, you need to know how to check the monk. It's not that simple. But if you know how to do that, then it's very recommended by the Buddha himself. So we check a monk through their sila, samadhi, panya. That means virtue, concentration, and wisdom. And virtue is the easiest to check. So of course you need to know the rules, so you know what is supposed and what is not supposed. So for example, a monk who is fully enlightened or a monk who is going to be fully enlightened, or in any way, if a monk is on the way to be fully enlightened, he will never ever touch money. That's according to our scriptures. So you may see some deviations in the reality, but I really like to refer to the scriptures, especially if I myself want to become that. So what do I want to become? Do I want to become a money-touching enlightened person, or do I want to become a money-not-touching enlightened person, you know? So the scriptures teach about money-not-touching enlightened persons. They teach about always mindful enlightened persons, so they never sleep. Non-greedy, non-hating, non-deluded enlightened persons. So that kind of enlightened person, that kind of attainment is very good, very beneficial for both me and others, if I can have it. So that's where I'm going to. And the scriptures suggest these characteristics, and when we are examining a monk, when we are examining a teacher to be or a present teacher, then we can apply these. We can apply this knowledge. So we can see whether the monk touches money, whether he's greedy, whether he's hating, whether he's deluded. We can watch the monk whether he is mindful, whether he's mindless, and that way gradually we can come to a conclusion whether we want to learn from this person or not. You do not come to a conclusion whether a person is bad or wrong or good because you may be wrong. That's the number one problem. So what I would rather suggest, rather than labeling monks as good or wrong, I would suggest labeling as those who inspire you or those who don't inspire you. The scriptures actually suggest that first, if you search a teacher, first you have to search for a Buddha. So you search for the Buddha, and it may happen that you cannot find the Buddha. For example, today there is no Buddha. So what are you going to do? The scriptures suggest that you search for a fully enlightened monk. Okay, so you search for a fully enlightened monk, If you cannot find one, then you search for a monk who has attained the third stage of enlightenment. There are 4. You search for a monk who has attained the third stage. If you cannot find that one, you search for a monk who has attained the second stage. There are many monks like that, so this discussion would be more difficult. But let's say that you cannot find one, so you find a monk who has attained the first stage. There are even more monks like that. Okay, you can't find anyone like that. Well, then I think you would have to be quite blind in Myanmar. Then if you can't find any monk who has attained even the first stage of enlightenment, then you search for a monk who has memorized all of the 40 books of Tipitaka. If you can't find one like that, then you search for a monk who has memorized how many? 5 and 3, 8 books of Tipitaka. If you can't find one like that, you search for a monk who memorized at least 5 books of the Tipitaka, Why do you search monks who know the scriptures? The suggestion is that actually a monk who has memorized all of the scriptures may be even more skillful in instructing you in meditation because they know all the ways, all the instructions. But my own experience with teachers is not like that. The problem is that having memorized scriptures and having experienced scriptures is a totally different world. So when a monk is enlightened, regardless what is the level, they will most preferably lead you the way they themselves went. So if the monk first started with concentration on breath, and then they continued observing the impurities of the body, and then they observed the mind, then most probably they will instruct you in that way. If the monk started concentration on loving kindness, and then they would observe the body and mind, then most probably that's the way they would instruct you. It is not common that a monk would instruct a student in a way that they never meditated, because it's so unfair, like the monk knows one way perfectly through their own experience, so why would they teach something that they have never ever experienced? In terms of practice, not in terms of attainment. So that's the problem, that monks who are enlightened, they are enlightened in one way, that means the way that helped them, and they will teach you that one way in the best way. So they can teach you any other way also, but it will not be as good as when they're speaking about their own path. On the other hand, a monk who has memorized the scriptures, the monk will be able to show you the path in all different ways. I myself take this with a grain of salt, because again, my experience with monks who have memorized scriptures and who don't meditate is very non-practical. But they are always, of course, good source of knowledge, good source of inspiration and suggestions on the practice, in the practice. So if you want to find perfect teacher, you do not, I would suggest that you do not check them according to their knowledge at all. Knowledge usually is the last thing that would ever indicate virtue or wisdom, I mean experiential wisdom. But you first of all check monks in terms of their virtue. So how greedy are they? How angry are they? How deluded are they? You know? And if you feel that their virtue is perfect, if you feel that they are really powerful in their concentration, if you feel that they are really powerful in their understanding of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self, then I recommend them.